Yeah, sir has in fact made my work a lot more easier. He has talked about so many terms that are going to crop up here, like plagiarism, like maybe salami publication, and stuff like that, and retractions. So let us principally understand who an author is, what is an author's responsibility, what are author rights, and finally end with talking about the copyright issues in scholarly publishing. So we will be discussing about authorship, as I already told. We'll try to understand how the concept of authorship has evolved over time. And then what are the definitions? Who is an author? Who is not an author? What are the different types of authors? And then we'll look at the loopholes in this definition. Obviously, it's not a perfect definition, but it is working well as of now. And then we'll discuss some of the copyright issues, understand what a copyright is, how to not fall into the trap of uh, copyright violation, and we'll summarize our data. So as Vikas sir told, all of us are responsible while we publish. The author, the editor, the peer reviewer, the publisher, everyone are responsible, and we have to be honest to ourselves. So I'm sure all of us have played hide and seek. You know, if the person who is catching, he does not count till 20, he skips 10, after 10 he goes to 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So that is cheating, but his friends know that he won't do that. That's why they are going to hide. So he has to be, yeah. So our catcher has to be maintain his integrity, and the other players should not cross the boundaries and go elsewhere to hide. So all of them have to be really honest to themselves while playing this, and there's no monitor, there's no umpire here like in cricket or other sports. So precisely this is how all of us should be while writing a scientific work. So let us see why authorship is important. So authorship is important because when somebody is named as an author, it means that we are giving due credit to that person's work. And also, it also means that we are assigning responsibility to the about that work. Whatever is written, he is the author's responsibility. So this is important in academia, especially for growth, for career growth in an academic institute or as a scientist, or in a social, when you meet amongst your friends in a conference. If you have a publication, if you're an author, you feel good. And now we have all these author profiles where you can show off some of your publications. Then financial, especially when you have done some work and you have given credit as an author, you can extend the work by means of applying for grants, by means of applying for sponsorship elsewhere. So only if you have a backup of something that is reflected in your authorship credentials, only then will you be able to do all these things and get these uh, aids. So to make it short, authorship is important because it gives accountability for the published work, as well as it gives credit to the person who has done it. So there are some desirable attributes, like in life, one has to be honest, one has to be accurate about what is he or she is reporting, one has to be efficient. Just because these kids can go and hide anywhere, they can't cross their boundary, they have made their own boundaries. So you have to be efficient, you have to use your resources in a proper way and try to put out a good work in the resources that is possible. And finally, one has to be very objective. You have to just put out the results that you have got and not extrapolate it to measures that can mean something else. So then this is so simple. All of us know that these are, most of us have learned about all these credentials in all our moral science classes. But why is it difficult? So it is problem because scientific research is expanding and there's a concept of publish or perish, especially in academia. All of them are pressurized to keep churning out papers, which is not possible. If you want a good quality paper, you'll have to wait, and it comes slowly. And research performance needs to be analyzed. It's not just you publish, Now people start asking you, where have you published? What is the impact factor of the journal? What is the citation rate? What is the H index? This. So all this actually brings in a lot of stress to a young researcher at least. And then, you tend to take some of those shortcuts and get into trouble later on. So what happens if one cheats? It's simple. You can just mix up some numbers and publish it. And what happens? If found out, there will be retraction. And retraction, if the editorial board does it with the proper, as sir told, with the proper message saying that it was retracted for so reason, then there's a big black mark in your career. And most of the journals may not actually receive or accept your publications from there now. Moreover, most of the journals are run by some of the publishing groups. Major journals are run by maybe 5-6 publishing group houses. So it will be circulated across all journals, and you as an author may find it difficult to publish in all those journals. So overall, when we see authorship issues leads to retraction in about 6 to 8% of the retractions. So when they saw for about 17,000 retractions, what they found is main concerns regarding authorship was seen in about 400, and forged authorship was also seen in about 300. So adding on to about 800 cases of authorship issues that had led to retractions. What is alarming is that all these retractions, majority of them are happening in Asia. By Asia, I don't mean India alone. There are other countries, but majority of them are happening in Asia. That may be also because we have, there is a lot of, the population in Asia is more, the pressure is more, all those things. But we have to be careful that Asia is already under a scanner, and we can't afford to do more mistakes. So when we look at authorship misconducts, it is actually not new. Even William Shakespeare has been considered as one of the greatest literary giants. Even his work is found to be plagiarized by a 15th century from a 15th century poet. So this has come up because now there are very powerful softwares to catch plagiarism. So before, it might have been easier to evade some misconduct or retraction, but now getting caught is really, the chances are really high. So when in a plus one paper, when they saw about 12,772 papers, when they analyzed, they found that approximately 48% of the co-authors did not fulfill the authorship criteria. At that time, it was not very strict, but now it is becoming very strict, that all the people who are listed as authors satisfy the authorship criteria, which sir has told, and I'll be repeating it again. So to summarize, retractions just is a tip of the iceberg, and authorship criteria not being fulfilled or fabrication of data is actually still going on, and we have to be extra careful as authors to avoid this. So authorship has started off the definition of authorship has started off in 1978, where the ICMJ required a statement confirming that all authors have seen and agreed upon the manuscript. Later on, the 3 authorship criteria mentioned in 1988 and the collective authorship and also acknowledgement for other contributors started in 1988. In 1994, order of authorship became important, who is the first author, second author, and so on. And in 2004, emphasis on author contributions or guarantor of paper, now also known as the corresponding author, became mandatory. And in 2013, the 4 authorship criteria came into place. So what are the 4 authorship criteria? Who is an appropriate author? So to become an author, one should have either contributed for the conception or design of the study, or in the acquisition, analysis, or interpretation of data. And all of them should be involved in drafting or revising the intellectual content or the manuscript. And before publication, all of them should have read it and approved the final version. Once it is published, all the authors have to be accountable for all the aspects of the work. It's not that I have only done experimental work and he has only done clinical work and I can't be responsible for clinical work. That does not work. All the authors are responsible for all of the content in the manuscript. So anybody who satisfies all the 4 criteria are only known as authors. Anybody else who does not satisfy either at least one of this can be acknowledged, but they should not be shown as authors. So then there are issues of inappropriate authorship. So who is an inappropriate author? Anybody who do not satisfy all the 4 criteria becomes an inappropriate author. So the first type of inappropriate authorship is called guest authorship. Then there is something called ghost authorship and a gift authorship. So guest authorship, who are they? So we have written a paper now and we want some big name in it. So we talk to a friend who is somewhere else in the world or somewhere else in India. So we ask him, can you be a co-author? He says, okay, very well. Then he becomes a guest author. He or she has not done any type of work. But why do people do this? People do this because if there is a big name in the in your manuscript, the chances of publications is perceived to be high, which is not true actually. And then comes the gift authorship. It's easy. We gift authorship to someone, usually the seniors or department chairs or administrators or colleagues or spouse or kinship. So here it's not a very difficult thing to guess why this is done. It is usually done to get back favor or not to fall in bad books of your seniors or others. And then there is a ghost author. Here, somebody has done all the work, but then when the manuscript comes out, that individual's name is not there. So the person becomes a ghost. Because the colleagues are too junior, usually they are left out, or to avoid conflict of interest, especially in industry-sponsored trials. So the better way some of them are arguing is we have to attribute the work done by each author in a journal. So you just say that this person has done the laboratory work, this person has done the statistical work, and so on. Because now papers are getting bigger, the data is becoming bigger. It's impossible for one person to handle the whole thing. So that could be another way of showing authorship, but it is still not in vogue. And people who do not satisfy the authorship criteria, suppose somebody has done a search for you, so he has access to all the web bases, and that individual has done all the searches for you. You can acknowledge that individual in your paper and be very specific why you are acknowledging him. And before acknowledgement, make sure you take the permission of that individual, stating that you will be acknowledged in this paper. So there are some loopholes in the authorship criteria, all the 4 that I've told. People might not actually satisfy it. So especially in large collaborative studies like this. Now here there are at least names of 5 different groups that have done the research. So whom do you attribute all this work to? So still authorship criteria, the ICMJE criteria does not actually solve such problems. And then especially some of the authors may not actually take part in writing the review or writing the manuscript. So or analyzing the data. At that time, at such times, such problems happen. For instance, in this paper, which was published in 2018 in Nature, which was published and within 15 to 20 days, it was retracted. The reason being, people found out that, these images, the blue squares were identical, they were just cloned, the red squares were cloned, and the images were manipulated. These are done by very big people, very big scientists, reputed scientists, and I'm sure they had no intentions of doing it, but it might have been done by an oversight or intentionally by a junior colleague. So just because those authors might not have read it completely or not analyzed or not micromanaged, they have lost out on this big publication. So the paper was eventually retracted, stating that there is some discrepancy in the data submitted. Then why do these complexities occur at all? So in, suppose we have an international or a national level collaboration, so there is language barrier, we can't understand. We might be collaborating with an English speaking nation. We might be collaborating with a non English speaking nation. So it becomes very difficult for everybody to read and understand the manuscript. The cultural practices are different across this thing, and speciality wise also. Suppose we are collaborating with a basic scientist, so who does not know anything, who does not understand anything about the clinical context of the work. So it becomes very difficult for them to actually read and critically analyze those parts of the manuscript. So that is when these are the issues that lead to some of the authorship discrepancies. So currently the authorship order is in commonly given as the person who has done the maximum work, or the main investigator, maybe the junior most part. Suppose somebody is doing a PhD, or somebody's MD or DM thesis, he becomes the first author, and followed by him will be the second most person who has helped it, and finally the last person will be the senior most person in the lab, senior most investigator in the lab or the clinic. But there is another way to put it. We could just put the author order in an alphabetical order, or we can attribute equal credit to everyone. And there is also provision to give multiple first authors and multiple corresponding authors when there are two big suppose there are two big collaborations going on between two organizations, two institutes. So in each institute, both of them would have done equal amount of work, so both of them should be first authors, and so there is a provision to give multiple first and multiple corresponding authors. So when can we suspect inaccuracies in a paper? As a peer reviewer or as an editor, when can we start suspecting inaccuracies in authorship? So we have to become like Sherlock Holmes and dig deep into the manuscript. So first, the name on the author list is from some other unrelated research area. Everything is from pediatrics, and one may be a computer engineer or something like that, which is unrelated, completely unrelated. Then you can actually investigate further and find out the relevance of those authorship. It can be real, but such are red flags to say that the editor and the peer reviewer should be a little cautious. Then a similarity check shows the work derived from a thesis. Usually if the thesis is uploaded in public domain, when you run a plagiarism check, it will show that so much % is taken from this thesis, and the person who has done the thesis is nowhere in this authorship list. So that means that there is some problem. There is a ghost author there. Then unfeasibly long or short author list. Suppose there is a case report, a simple case report, and you have 12 authors. So that means there is a lot of guest authorship going on. And there is a randomized control trial of 1,000 patients each, and you only have one author. That means you have left out a lot of people, and ghost authors are there. Then manuscript was drafted or revised by someone and not on the author list or acknowledged. So how do we find this out? When we get the Word document that is uploaded, we download it and look for properties, and then we can find that people who has actually edited it is not part of the author. That means there is some professional who is helping them, who may be or may not be acknowledged. Finally, language quality. Suppose you read the covering letter, it sounds very good, but when you read the manuscript, the language is different. Here it's again a red flag stating that there might be a problem. And then there is an industry sponsored trial, but nobody from the industry is featuring the author list. That again might be a problem. It might be a red flag for inappropriate authorship. And then once a manuscript is submitted, when it comes for revision, you make changes. The authors decide to make changes in the authorship order, or add one more person or delete one more person. This is absolutely not accepted unless there is genuine reasons to do that. And such things also show that there is some inaccuracy and some inappropriate authorship that has taken place. So what are the solutions? So the solution is to educate the potential authors about the accepted rules and the possible shortcomings, like how this this whole seminar is part of educating the potential authors. And we have to encourage institutes to have defined strategies. If somebody is caught with authorship misconduct, the institute should know what is to be done with such people. And editors and reviewers are in a position to spot inaccuracies, and they have to flag it to the editor. And publishers and editors should update the existing policies for authorship on their website. For instance, some of the websites don't ask for what is the role of each person enlisted here. So that has to be upfront asked, so that the authors declare what each of them have done, and there is no problem with or no conflict there. Next, coming to a related issue, copyright. So copyright is one of the pillars of the intellectual property rights. Intellectual property rights is the legal right that protects the privilege given to individuals who have created something. They could be owners, they could be authors, they could be dancers, they could be choreographers, anything. So under intellectual property rights, we have trademark, we have design rights, we have copyrights, we have patents, and we have performer rights. And today we look at copyrights. So copyright is preservation of intellectual property in matters related to authorship. So copyright could be for a novel, it could be for a scientific manuscript, it could be just for your correspondence, or any literary work that has been written by you is preserved or is protected by the Copyright Act. So here the rights of the author is protected. So what are the rights of the author? The author can rightfully reproduce the work, rightfully display the work in public domain, rightfully modify the work, and rightfully distribute the work. So then the question comes, okay, fine, is the author or is the person who has written the manuscript always the rightful owner of the work? So we have to understand who owns the copyright. Usually when we write a manuscript and submit it to a journal, the journal asks for a copyright transfer agreement. Why is this required? If we don't give a copyright transfer agreement, the journal editor cannot edit the work or cannot publish your work without your consent. So they take the copyright transfer. How do you know who owns the copyright in a manuscript? You go to a manuscript and you look for this copyright symbol. Wherever that copyright symbol is, that individual or group is the owner of the copyright. So in this case, it is the publisher who is the owner of the copyright. So there are some common copyright violations in publications, which will be dealt with on later presentations. So one is plagiarism. Plagiarism is nothing but copy. You copy the content and claim it is your own. It could be text, it could be figures, it could be tables, or it could be whole paragraphs, or it could be the whole article. Then duplicate publication. Sometimes you make multiple submissions in 3 different places, and all the 2 get published. That becomes duplicate publication. It is a outright copyright violation, and you should immediately retract it from your end, or legal actions will be taken. And exceptions, when the only exception in duplicate publication sometime is you can maybe publish the same work in different languages, but it is always important that you inform both the publishers about this. And there is something called salami slicing, where, as Vikas sir told, you have 3 biomarkers in one study, and you publish each biomarker try to publish each biomarker in other different papers, but the basic data will be the same. So this also is a breach of copyright. It's also a copyright violation. And then there is redundant publication. The same work has been done. You're also doing the same work after 1 year and trying to publish it. You're copying the methodology, you're taking the same patient group, you're doing the same type of experiments without any modifications. Then you try to publish it, then it again becomes a copyright violation, though you're not copying the same work, copying the same manuscript. So how can you avoid copyright violations? First of all, we have to determine if permission to reproduce is required. If there is, how we are going to determine is, we'll discuss this. Then once you determine, if you think the permission is required, then you identify the owner. We just discussed how to identify the owner. We just look at the copyright symbol where it is in a manuscript, and that individual is the owner. and then identify the rights needed. What all rights do you need? Do you need an image to be published? Do you need a table to be reproduced? Do you need just a paragraph to be quoted? You have to decide what is needed and then contact the owner and negotiate whether payment is required. Usually for academics, usually for scientific publication, payments are usually wiped off, but there could be some journals which will levy some price for republishing images. Then always get the permission in writing. Now since there is email, it has become more simple. People can just send you an email and that can be kept as a proof. So you just contact the copyright holder. If the copyright holder is the author, you seek written permission, you email the author and you seek written permission. If it is a publisher, you can check the journal website for instructions as to how to check for copyrights. Or you could use automated websites, which like RightsLink, which will automate your copyright application. And or you could directly contact the editorial office if none of the other two are not clear in the website. So how do we determine if permission is required? This is the first question that we have to ask before we reproduce somebody's work. So here there is a doctrine of fair use where there is a guideline for exceptions for owners' exclusive use of copyrighted material. So suppose the purpose and character of the use says that it is not for a non-profit education or part of a scholarly activity, like this presentation. I have used a lot of material that have been published by others, but I have not taken a copyright permission. So this is not a breach of copyright laws. Then the nature of the work being used. If it is fact-based or a generic information or a review or criticism, like now it is COVID era. So somebody says that COVID, this drug has been working in COVID, and all the newspapers on the next day publish it. So are the newspapers violating the copyrights of the author? No, they are not. It is a fact-based and it is a very generic information. They are not trying to reproduce it for financial gains. Then amount of work that is used. If it is a very small part of the work, usually it is overlooked by these publishers. And effect of the use on potential income related to work. Suppose there is a textbook that has just been published, and then you give it to a Xerox shop, photocopy shop. You ask that individual to make 100 copies and sell it. So this becomes a major copyright violation because you're hitting into the actual publisher's market. So this becomes a problem, and there could be serious both civil lawsuits as well as criminal lawsuits against you. So to summarize, authorship means credit as well as responsibility. We have to decline gifts, we have to exercise all ghosts, and we have to uninvite guests when it comes to authorship. All of us have to be honest, accurate, efficient, and objective while we report our study findings. And copyright is the right of the author or the owner who has done the work. And while we do our work, we have to watch for plagiarism, duplicate publication, and redundancy. Above all, we have to seek permission if you think that is required before we use the above said work.